Let's see what Democrat Rep. Jason Crow has to say.
What law are you talking about that's being broken? And then you said that he's implying that he might do something that they wouldn't want to uphold or follow through with in the future. What are you talking about specifically?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. Well, number one, the protests at Lafayette Square in the first Trump administration where he said, can't you just shoot them? Can't you just shoot them in the legs or something? That's his direct quote. And of course, the then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
That was not a military order. That was a comment. That's not a military order.
When that's coming from the President of the United States to your generals, don't you think that's a request?
I'm asking specifically right now what you're talking about.
Yeah, number two, he's also threatened to send the military into Chicago and other cities to, quote, go to war with those cities. Right? That is a very, very disturbing thing. Number three,
So is disturbing unlawful? If Trump has the authority, and he very well may, under Statute 12406, under the Insurrection Act, to use the military within America's borders, that doesn't make it an unlawful order. He doesn't like it. The communist Jason Crow doesn't like it. That doesn't make it unlawful.
Also alluded to sending troops to polling stations, which is actually a violation of U.S. law. U.S. criminal law prohibits.
Where's the order?
Troops from going to polling stations, and he's alluded to that. So those are just one of many examples.
You're talking about
Donald Trump has.
Are illusions unlawful orders?
Illusions. You're not talking about actual policy. You're not talking about things that are members of our service members who we revere and respect are actually being asked to do. So when you see this video on all over the place, when you see this video on social media, I think a lot of people scratch their heads and they say, what exactly are they talking about? Are they talking about
Martha,
not allowing gunboats to make it to the United States carrying drugs?
No.
Is that what you're talking about?
Martha, here's a novel idea. How about we actually prevent things from happening before they become a problem?
I think that's what they're trying to do.
What you're saying is we have to wait until there's a problem to respond to that problem.
No, I'm not.
Right? As a military officer, what I think is important is we train people, we give them information, we prepare people for challenges.
So we're 2 minutes into this 2-minute and 30-second video, and he still hasn't named an unlawful order
coming down the pike. That is what I did as a commander in the military. That's what I'm doing now. As we are standing by our troops, we are reminding them of their obligation.
Order from the commander in chief that we are asking our military to carry out, are you objecting to? This is very, very vague, and it was so vague in this video. I don't think people could figure out what you guys were all talking about, honestly.
Martha, Donald Trump has made a series of very disturbing comments.
But he can't name any of them. He can't name any.
Trooper, Army Ranger, you know better than most how crucial the chain of command is. You say you can refuse illegal orders. You must refuse illegal orders. What exactly are you telling the soldiers to do? Stand up and say no or quit?
No, we're telling the soldiers exactly what they're trained to do in basic training. Like I just said, you have to follow the law. Right?
But what does that mean?
But above the chain, it means you follow the law. It means that if there's an unlawful order,
I wonder if he's going to be able to give an example of an unlawful order that it's okay for military personnel not to follow.
You're asked to violate the Constitution. You're not obligated to do that. And let's use some examples, by the way. So Abu Ghraib prison, right? There were privates and junior enlisted who were ordered to do things that were unlawful, and 11 of them ended up being criminally prosecuted. The My Lai massacre in Vietnam, where you had Private Durst and a warrant.
Okay, what's happening with Trump? You didn't make the Sedition video in Vietnam.
Officer refused to massacre civilians. They were the heroes of that moment, but their commander, their Lieutenant Calley, actually ordered it, and he went to prison. So there are example after example in U.S. military history of people that are asked to do things that are unlawful, usually almost always involving committing violence or crimes against civilians that uniformed personnel are obligated to refuse if that's what they're ordered to do. And we're concerned about this, Elizabeth. We're concerned about this because of the rhetoric of this president, right? The president actually said, hey, can you shoot these people in the leg during the Lafayette Square protest?
That's not an order.
But that wasn't an order. I think that was a question, right?
And this president has a long history of saying nefarious and dubious things, right?
So nefarious and dubious is not an unlawful order. order. Is he saying the military personnel, active duty military personnel, and the intelligence community should decline to follow orders they consider nefarious and dubious?
Right, but you don't ever wait until an order is actually given to train people and tell them what their obligations are.
So to be
is not everybody in the military already trained what their obligations are with respect to unlawful orders? Don't they cover that in boot camp?
So are you saying that there was not necessarily any particular precipitating event? There is no specific thing out there that made you decide now is the right time?
That's right. To be clear,
there was nothing. There was nothing. It's all hypothetical. Rob B says this video from the Democrats clearly was aimed at causing some troops to be insubordinate and openly opposed to the policies and orders of POTUS, Secretary of War, and subordinate commanders. It's not the job or responsibility of any politician in Congress to address the military en masse. Every member of the military receives training on the Constitution, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and service regulations in regards to the responsibility of not following illegal orders. They're also advised of the consequences of not following orders that are later deemed as lawful. Additionally, they are educated on historical events, such as the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, when U.S. Army Lieutenant William Calley ordered his platoon to murder hundreds of civilians. By the way, I bet there's two sides to that story. How innocent were those civilians? Our troops do not need partisan politicians from either side to train or warn them of the responsibility to disregard illegal orders. That video is shameful and condescending towards our troops and quite possibly can be considered seditious. I certainly think it can. Buzz Patterson, again, carried the nuclear football for Clinton in the White House and elsewhere, says, sadly, some junior non-commissioned officer or young officer with a young family is going to use Slotkin's sedition video to justify not following an order, not because it's illegal, but because he's been emboldened by irresponsible Democrat rhetoric to think it's up to him. He'll think he has their backing, but in reality, they don't give a shit and will hang him out to dry. Bookmark and watch this. And Dinesh D'Souza, who I've been putting on the high burner recently, but this is a pretty good quote. I wanted to give him credit for coming up with it. From Lincoln. Lincoln was talking about dealing with people who engage in sedition, even if they're not actively, forcefully doing something wrong, and they're convincing others to do something wrong. And Lincoln asked, but must I shoot a simple-minded soldier boy who deserts, while I must not touch a hair of the wily agitator who induces him to desert? No, the agitator's on the hook, too, subject to firing squad. Minnesota Rick for Trump says, since watching the seditions video, I've been wondering who decides what is a legal order and an illegal order. I took the oath on January 17th, 1968, and will always follow my commander-in-chief's orders without question. So again, in the range of orders, there is a hypothetical, minuscule end bit of that could be an unlawful order. But if there's any constitutional or military justification for the order, it's lawful. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But it's a lawful order. The range of unlawful orders is very limited. And what the military does not encourage or allow is for every service person to initiate a debate on the lawfulness of every order that's issued. That would just be insubordination and sedition. And the Democrats saying, hey, we were just saying facts. The military is not required to follow lawful orders. That's just the truth. But of course, they weren't saying it absent relevant context. This guy notes, repetition of an academic statement in a manner that the defendants know or should know would tend to indiscriminately undermine the orders of the president, everything he does is unlawful, represents, quote, an attempt to cause insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, or refusal of duty by members of the military or naval forces of the U.S., and that is a violation of 18 U.S.C. 2387, and it is seditious conspiracy. Uncommon Joyce writes, U.S. military intelligence, 1978 to 1981, Cold War period. I don't know what they were trying to suggest in their video. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure it out. We all know that we were not obligated to follow an unlawful order. Anyone who has served or is currently serving knows that. It was very clear they were suggesting that our current military should refuse to follow any orders from the current administration. If they were currently serving in the military and did this, likely they would be court-martialed. I doubt anything will happen to them. There's no judge unbiased enough to hear a case against them. Congress is too feckless to censure them. However, I think the Department of Defense should consider whether Mark Kelly, in particular, is still entitled to his military awards, medals, and retirement benefits. And I think all of them should lose their security clearance. And I don't think there's anything unreasonable with those proposals. So when they say you don't have to obey illegal orders, well, they put that label on everything Trump does. So effectively, they're just saying straight up, defy the president. And this is from a YouTube video from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. So before the Sedition video. And they're explicitly calling Trump's conduct illegal. They don't want to say that now. Now, they're not saying it after the Sedition video, but before they knew the Sedition video was going to come out, they were calling Trump's orders illegal. If they said it now, then they would be asked, so you're telling the U.S. military not to follow these orders? They don't want to be in a position that they're caught saying that. But this is the unavoidable context. Let's listen to just a few seconds of this video.
Crackdown. President Trump is shrugging off reports he is eyeing Venezuelan military targets that his administration suspects are used for drug trafficking. That comes after a series of U.S. attacks on suspected Venezuelan drug boats. Lawmakers were briefed on the operation.
There's nothing that we heard in there that changes my assessment that this is completely illegal, that it is unlawful.
It wasn't completely satisfied at all. I still have a lot of questions that need to be answered, and I think they owe us some explanations.
I heard no strategy.
There's Jason Crow again.
No end game, no assessment of how they are going to end the flow of drugs into the United States.
Am I leaving satisfied? Absolutely not. All
right, so they call the bombing of the Venezuelan boats illegal, unlawful, prior to the Sedition order. Here's a bit more. This is from 3 weeks ago now.
The White House hasn't provided any public evidence that the boats were carrying drugs, and there are legal concerns the U.S. could be violating maritime and human rights laws.
So it could be unlawful. It could be unlawful. That's what they were saying 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. That's what they've been saying since Trump was sworn in. With everything he did, everything he's doing is illegal. And with respect to the Venezuelan drug boats, by the way, it's really incontestable that this is lawful. I mean, every president has done this. Every president has the constitutional authority to protect the nation from clear and present dangers. Obama famously was dropping missiles on American citizens. People he knew to be American citizens overseas who he believed were working with terrorists. Obama dropped a lot of missiles on people. There was no trial. There was no due process. He just killed them. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying the president has the authority to defend the United States and our national security from clear and present dangers. That's one of the powers they get. That's what a consequence of electing someone to be president. You're giving them that authority. And there's really no question that these drug boats present a clear and present danger to the U.S. I mean, we know they're shipping drugs. We can see the drugs in the boat. One of the reasons we're blowing the boats up, this is a clip from 2019. And we were intercepting. So Trump was president, right? This is Trump doing this. Coast Guard intercepts a high-speed boat, and they intercept it with machine gun fire. Basically, they get it to stop. And just look at the video they have of this boat. It's crazy. Look at all the bags of drugs, and that they're throwing the bags overboard. So what these guys would do is if they realized they were being approached by Coast Guard, they would just dump all the bags into the ocean. They would sink. And then if they got boarded, there were no drugs on the boat. Now, you know those were drugs, but you can't prove it, right? So the normal judicial process, criminal justice process, doesn't work with these guys. If you're just going to arrest them and nothing ever happens, you don't stop them. That's why Trump is blowing them up now. Look, so by the time the little Coast Guard boat pulls up, the drugs are off the boat. And this was Trump. Trump learned from this experience. He said in press meetings, they say, well, why don't you just intercept the boats? We've tried that and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. That's why we're blowing them up now.
On the Venezuela vessel strike, what legal authority were you guys working under, and will there be an after report on the strike?
Well, I'm sure there's going to be an after report. I mean, the legal authority, and I want to talk about these kids, is that there are people who are bringing literal terrorists who are bringing deadly drugs into our country, and the President of the United States ran on a promise of stopping this poison from coming into our country. Another question?
That is the authority.
First on Venezuela, what can you tell us about this Venezuelan boat that was taken out? And do you plan to provide proof that these were narco-terrorists who were on their way to the U.S.?
Well, we have proof. All you have to do is look at the cargo that was, like, it's spattered all over the ocean. Big bags of cocaine and fentanyl all over the place. And it was, plus we have recorded evidence that they were leaving. We've recorded them. They're just very careful because we know you people would be after us. We're very careful. The military.
So, by the way, the reason they're not releasing like the evidence like you would in a trial, there's no discovery here, because this is national security. They're using, satellite spying on cell phone communications. They're using human spies embedded within these organizations. They can't reveal any of that. This is all national security. And that would never be the case.
The military has been amazing.
And they're not required to. This is not a criminal justice proceeding.
And General Kane showed me a little while ago the clip, but you could actually see it, but you don't have to.
If you don't want to get blown up as a Venezuelan drug boat, don't present to the U.S. military as a Venezuelan drug boat.
To see it because we have recorded proof.
We haven't blown up the USS Minnow yet, right?
And evidence. We know what time they were leaving, when they were leaving, what they had, and all of the other things that you'd like to have.
And then you get people like this. This guy has a big account on X, well, reasonably big, 47,000 followers on X, about half the number I have. Says he's a U.S. veteran of the Ukraine Armed Forces and a past trial lawyer. And he says that there was an actual military lawyer who raised legal concerns about blowing up these boats, a lawyer at the U.S. Southern Command, presumably a JAG officer. And he says, that's the proof. That's the proof that blowing up these boats is unlawful. That's the proof that a military lawyer himself said it. And of course, that's nonsense. Just because one lawyer in the military, it could have been a Jason Crow character, right? A communist. Just because one lawyer has an opinion doesn't mean that's the settled issue. That one lawyer doesn't get to override the judgment of the commander-in-chief. And by the way, I can tell you as a lawyer, you get two lawyers in a room and we're going to disagree. That's the nature of being a lawyer. That's the nature of being a lawyer. He says he's a former veteran of the Ukraine Armed Forces, whatever that takes. Whatever that means. I don't know if he just went there and got a selfie or what. He clearly is not fighting there now. And my buddy, Kurt Schlichter, a California trial lawyer and prolific author. In fact, I just finished one of his books. I wish I had it here on my desk. I don't have it. American Apocalypse. It's kind of it's a book. It's like an oral history of America surviving a civil war with the progressive fascists. It's excellent. It's really good. And he also has a whole series of books with a similar theme involving a hero character, a protagonist, Kelly Turnbull. And I think he's releasing his 9th Kelly Turnbull book next month. And he's going to send me a copy to read ahead of time. And I'm going to have him on the show as a guest. So December 2nd, Kurt Schlichter. Kurt Schlichter will be a guest on the show. Kelly Turnbull is back. Pre-order now. Panama Red. That's him with his wife, his lovely wife there. Panama Red, the 9th People's Republic novel starring Kelly Turnbull, lawyer, Army colonel, retired. Great guy. I've met Kurt a number of times, hung out with him, and he's always a lot of fun. He responds to this loon, John Jackson, by noting, well, I'm an actual colonel in the U.S. military, not some sojourner into the Ukraine military. And I've been a lawyer for 30 years, and my legal opinion is that Trump blowing up the boats is absolutely legal. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, not assume you're lying, but rather that you're stupid, and somehow imagine that because one lawyer believes something, he's inevitably correct. Of course, in every single case I've ever participated in, and in every single case that every lawyer has ever participated in, the lawyers have disagreed about the facts and the law. So it's no surprise that one lawyer has different views from another lawyer. The fact that you like what lawyer A says more than what lawyer B says doesn't make lawyer A correct. You're not a commander. You're not an officer of any kind. And you don't have either the duty, obligation, or right to command or make decisions. Like I said, I assume you don't know any of this and you're not purposely trying to mislead people. I assume you're just freaking stupid. I responded to that with this. 911, I'd like to report a murder. A murder. Then that same loon, John Jackson, says, well, the government has no role here because these are actually just voluntary business transactions. Drug addicts are engaged in a voluntary business transaction, that it's not an armed attack on the U.S. under any possible concept of the law. Everyone who buys cocaine knows it could be laced with fentanyl in 2025. You act like drug dealers kidnap people and inject them involuntarily. He just completely, either intentionally or out of stupidity, misunderstands the dynamic here. And I wrote back to him to enlighten him. What this idiot and veteran of the Ukraine war is claiming that Trump's bombing of the narco drug boats, he's claiming it's a war crime. It's illegal because Trump's murdering people engaged in a voluntary business transaction. What he can't grasp is that the relevant conflict in question is not a voluntary business transaction between a drug addict and a drug dealer. The relevant conflict Trump's addressing here is not a business transaction. The relevant conflict in question is between the sovereign United States of America and a narco-terrorist state engaged in irregular chemical warfare against our nation. That's what this is. The U.S. president and commander-in-chief has the constitutional authority to defend the nation against any clear and present danger, regardless of how bad a drug addict would like to engage in his voluntary business transaction with a narco-terrorist state that's engaged in irregular chemical warfare against the U.S.